Welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about this topic about what is the importance of domain knowledge for product managers, right? So many a times, whenever I talk to product managers, they say that okay, they're working in let's say a domain which is around marketing or advertising technology. Now they are interested in let's say moving into e-commerce domain, or folks who have been into let's say B2B marketing or B2B sales. They say that okay, have the domain knowledge about it. How can I move into different domain as a product manager? How can I take all those knowledge that I have, and how can I move there as a product manager, right? So there is always an element. There are as I see it, this question always keeps bubbling up. Even when companies recruit candidates, they say okay, we want people with who have exposure to the domain or who have knowledge of the domain, etc. So this thing always keeps coming up in the conversation. So I thought it will be good to share my perspective, which is going to be much more experiential and practical rather than theoretical, because like most other things, this does not have any kind of, you could say, firm answers, or I can't give an answer which says that okay, this is the way you have to do it, or this is the charter, or these are the firm answers. So it's going to be much more experiential. And just to as a short introduction, so I've been in the industry for around 20 plus years, currently working as a vice president of product with eGov's Foundation. Past, I've worked with mix of corporations like enterprise software applications like Oracle, Nice Systems, Genpact, product service companies, with startups like Unifor, etc. I've completed my bachelor's of engineering and MBA both from Manipal, and I've been working especially in the civic tech domain. I've been working with very closely with many of the startup organizations, with the product managers as well as with the founding team. And that's in short about me. So what are we going to talk about today? There are two questions, and these are very much relevant from these are things that I'm going to cover from the perspective of product managers, right? So let's say you are a product manager who's already into a domain. You could be somebody with experience, significant experience, less experience. You could be a fresher straight out of it, and you've been selected as an associate product manager, or you're a product manager who's already there, and you want to pick up the domain knowledge there. Somehow you landed into a new domain. So this will be one question that always keeps coming up. How do I pick up the domain knowledge when I'm new to a domain, right? Then the second question which comes up, which is related but slightly different, is that how do I successfully cross over to a new domain? Like, I'm seeing that there aren't any investments happening where I am, or I'm stuck, or I want to explore new domains so that I become much more proficient as a product manager, or as folks say, how do you become domain agnostic, right? How do you become that kind of a person? So how do I successfully cross over to a new domain? So these are the two questions which I will try to share based on my experience, my thinking about how things have happened with me, how I've seen others in the industry crossover, how have they managed, what I've learned. Sometimes through failure, sometimes through successes. I'll be sharing that with you. So it's purely experiential, right? So before when I entered the industry, right, it was with a company called Semcorp Logistics. And there, once I entered, I was bombarded with a lot of things, jargon, 3PL, 4PL, stock transfer, C&F agent, cross docking. I was like, okay, you're just receiving these things, okay. You don't know what they mean or what somebody is talking to, right? You try to cope up. Same way, as I went to a different industry, different domain, then I was bombarded with different jargon. What is the bill of material? What is the term of reference? How are we handling unordered receipts, right? Or, again, going to a different domain, is it a platform layer? Is it a hybrid cloud? Have you thought about telemetrizing it? Is it a pub sub mechanism, right? So what is the indexing layer? Is it a state data center? What is the coverage ratio? So every time, you enter any new domain, right, you are bombarded with these things, right? you're bombarded with different terms, folks are talking around you, and it feels like, you are like a babe in the woods there, right? Everybody is talking something different, everybody is, mentioning things that are going over your head. Some you're able to relate to, some you vaguely understand, but you know uh, different things keep coming up. For example, basic thing like FTEs. Once I moved from a pure product company like Oracle to Genpact, FT, it took me some time. Now, okay, it's full-time employee, full-time equivalence. How do we compute that? What is it? How is it related to that? So you're lost. Or when I went into a startup like Unifor, there it was about using speech and working on analytics. So people started talking about speech diarization. So it was like totally different, man. And it feels like, you're totally lost. What is this happening around me? There's a whole lot of confusion. Whenever you are into a new domain, right? You feel overwhelmed. You feel as if, there are things that are going over your head every time. So you narrow it down to, okay, I don't understand. What is this thing? What are these people talking about? And what this whole thing around the domain is, right? So you feel, kind of lost. But actually, when we look at domain, right, the way I visualize it, or the framework that I have in my mind, after thinking about all these, about this concept, is that what is actually a domain, right? Domain, in essence, right, I would want all of you to visualize it as it's a knowledge of a specific, specialized discipline or field. It is very contrast to general knowledge or domain independent knowledge. Considering most of us, I think, who are interested today and who are attending this are in the software engineering domain. The domain knowledge usually must be learned from the software users in the domain rather than the software developers, right? So that's where the domain knowledge and what is this? When we say domain knowledge, right? We all have a vague sense for it. But what does that actually comprise? It makes up who are the different roles which are there, what are their different responsibilities, right? What are the different data storage and sharing mechanisms? What are the legal and industry specific rules, right? What are the tools used? What are the business policies? What are the different workflows? There could be many, many more such things that entirety constitutes a kind of a domain, right? That when we say, it's the domain, or that's what it entirely constitutes. And then you as product managers, you need to communicate between the users who are there within this domain. And that communication is something that is very important. Now, when communication has to happen, we must find a common language to communicating, right? You as product managers need to communicate with the domain experts who are part of this domain, right? So developing this shared vocabulary to communicate with the folks in this domain can take some time, and it it happens in every domain that you are involved in, right? So the objective is that, okay, there is a domain knowledge. This domain knowledge, abstracting it comprises set of vocabulary, it comprises certain rules, certain things which are encoded, which are not encoded. So you need to find a way to be able to communicate, and some of this knowledge may be applicable across domains, right, which we call as domain independent knowledge, that you as a product manager need to independently develop. For example, how do you do a A/B testing? How do you do user experience design? How do you do agile software development? That is domain independent knowledge. Now we're talking about the domain specific knowledge, right? So whenever we are, let's say, in a domain, one way to approach this, if you were to look at these as, some kind of a concentric circles, we could look at it as outside and moving from the outer boundaries to reaching the core, or starting from the core to going out to the outer boundaries. But as a product manager, right, what are you really interested in, right? Uh, what would you be really interested in is trying to arrive at set of business objectives for this particular domain, right? So think of, let's look at this framework, right? So any domain, it would have around it different things, but you as a product manager, you are not going there with, as a, let's say, a business process consultant, then your objective would be very different. But you as a product manager are much more interested in understanding for that domain, what are those business objectives that we are focused on. Now, the business objectives, they vary across domains, right? There are certain things which are common, but business objectives vary for a different domain. For example, it could be agility as a principle, right? We want to be much more agile. So digital transformation is very important for us. Or we would want market growth as a business objective, or revenue maximization, or data for decision making, right? So these are the certain business objectives, correct? So the pivotal question to answer in this case is that once we know what are the business, so you as a product manager needs to start at trying, instead of starting at the periphery of it, start with the business objectives. So once you want to arrive at the once you've arrived at the business objectives, the pivotal question to answer would be, how does my product address these business objectives, right? So you are a product manager, you are not a domain expert, right? Neither are you trying to be one once you start in that domain, correct? So how does my product address these business objectives? That is the question that you would want to answer. So how do you arrive at answers to this question? Is there some way of saying, how does my product address these business objectives? So you need to increase, you need to arrive at things like, how does my product help the users? You need to explore the user needs and problems, and this is like an iterative process. The more you churn between these two things, one is, how does my product help the users? Okay, you arrive at answer. Now explore that more and more, explore the user needs more and more. So the more you engage yourself with these two areas, how does my product help the users, and as you go deeper and deeper into exploring the user needs and problems, your understanding of this pivotal question, how does my product address the business objectives, it deepens. So if you have to take it to another level, you could say that your objective at this, whenever you enter into a new domain or within working with a domain, should be to achieve the depth of understanding about how does the product address these business objectives, right? Whereas there are things which are characterized not by depth but by width. For example, workflows, there could be humongous number of workflows, there could be different types of storage and sharing mechanism, there could be different tools used. So instead of focusing on the width and trying to be overwhelmed with the width of interactions, I think for you would be to go into the depth and look at trying to understand these business objectives. To understand the business objective, I think it comes down to how do you explore these user needs and problems. And as you go further and further, as you gain that depth, I think like a concentric circle, you expand your boundaries, right? You say that, okay, I've achieved a depth. Now let me now move from the core to the peripheries, right? And as you spend more time within that domain, your understanding of these business objectives, as you explore the user needs and problems, your understanding of this domain expands. Now, is this, how do we, when we say explore user needs and problems, so what does that actually mean, right? In classic product management, when we talk about exploring user needs, it starts with, answering a certain set of specific questions, right? These might not constitute the entire list. These could be the ones that you would start focusing on as you start getting into a domain. For example, who are the primary and secondary users of my product? As you engage with them, as you understand, as you shadow these users, as you study usage patterns, right? You are also arriving at things like, at the distinct points of time when they use my product. Is this something which is a daily use? Is it something weekly? Is it something during certain times? For example, one of the products I was working for was used only during the sales and operation planning meeting, right? It was used specifically for that. So sales and operations planning usually happen during when by the demand, the folks who do the demand management, or who do the demand planning for factories, they used to do that quarterly or during the monthly end cycles. So that is a very key insight. What is the point of time when my product is used most? And what are the, you've heard of this framework about jobs to be done, apply that framework. What are the jobs that my product is really used for, right? What is it used for? Is it used for arriving at certain decisions? Is it used for risk mitigation? Is it used to evaluate different choices? Is it used for comparison, right? Is it used in order to make sure that, the information gets to the next level, and then, you are protected for your decision? So what are the jobs that my product is being used for? And assume, one of the classic statements that I read is that Excel is an answer to everything in a B2B. If you have to think, okay, what I've made this product, what is the alternative to my product, especially in a B2B? What is the alternative to my product? It could start with Excel, Microsoft Excel being an alternative. right? Or it could be a manual process. Like, let's say, somebody we know who works very well with registers, who uses a combination of offline, online tools with the same level of productivity to deliver the same kind of, to get the job done, right? And most of the times, let's say, your product does not work in isolation, right? It is a part of a workflow. Should it work with something which is already there? Is there some other tool which is already there, right? Or should it work in conjunction with something else that is really needed by the organization? So this is what is called as, exploring the user needs and problem, right? And what would really happen, and then answering a question like, what would happen if the user stop using my product, right? If my product stops working or the user stops using my product, will that be the end of the world for him? Can he still get the job done, right? So these are the different questions that you can answer to explore user needs and problems. And as you explore these things with your existing users, some of it using different techniques like researching them, talking to them, conducting interviews, or using data, telemetrized data or transactional data, as you explore more and more, you would arrive at different understanding of user needs and problems, which will again, the objective is to again go back. If you were to look back, it is to explore or expand your domain dimensions. Apart from these, typically, whenever I was new, there are other sources. One of the best source I think all of us should look at is the APQC, right? You can look up this website, and they cover end to end for every domain, benchmarking, best practices, the process and performance management, knowledge management, about diverse domains, right? From financial management to performance measurement. So this could be a very good source whenever you are new to a domain. Then obviously, the second thing would be, in terms of upgrading self, like, domain specific training. There are a whole lot of things that are available now. Seminars and webinars, right? Domain specific resources. For example, if you're a analytics guy or you want to be in that domain, then spend a lot of time with data camp, look at Stack Overflow. Then social media. The overall thing is that, the first one is, is a great resource. But other things is, what is the philosophy between 2, 3, 4, and 5? It is that, birds of a feather flock together. Now, if you're a guy who's building software for, let's say, legal process outsourcing, right? So you should engage yourselves with folks with that domain, right? You should be attending seminars which are for the legal domain, right? You should look at, what are those specific resources that they go to, what are the magazines that they read, what are the newsletters they subscribe to, who are the thought leaders here. So these are some ways, as a product manager, you should be shadowing, you should constantly be on the lookout to improve your domain knowledge. So far, I think we are halfway there. And then, so far, we have addressed the first question, like, whenever I'm new to a domain, how do I, as a product manager, address the knowledge that is needed to be effective in that domain, right? Now, let's now look at the second thing, like, how do I move into a new domain? Or, how do I, I'm in a domain, let's say, in some domain, how do I move to a totally new domain, right? For that, let's look at 3 domains, like, financial technology as a domain, supply chain technology, and marketing technology. Now, domains are evolving, right? If you look at even a thing like financial technology, is that a domain? Or within financial technology is credit scoring, lending, financials, blockchain, crowdfunding, insurance tech, business solution, payments and remittances. Is that a domain by itself, right? So that is the question that we need to really understand. Like, when usually, people generalize it by saying that I'm in fintech, or, but we need to be much more specific. Similar example, when we talk about a supply chain technology landscape, like, if you just blow this up, this is how it looks like. Supply chain technology is vast. It isn't just your ERPs, etc., right? It comprises last mile drones. It comprises delivery services. It obviously, this is what we are very familiar with: enterprise resource planning, warehousing, trucking, supply chain logistics analytics, sensor and tagging, inventory management. Again, blockchain comes here, food supply chain. So every technology or every domain is characterized by verticals within it, or, which constitute that whole domain. Now, this might seem a lot, right? Even if we looked at fintech, supply chain tech, and then we look at marketing technology landscape, look at, right, There are parallel streams like advertising and promotion, content and experience, social and relationship, commerce and sales, and data. Again, within that, there are many other subdomains. We could call them verticals, sub-verticals, horizontal. But the domain specificity should be at the level of, it could be at this level, advertising and promotion, or it could be at the level of, you're saying that optimization, personalization, and testing is the domain that I'm really focused on. Or is it e-commerce platforms and carts? Is that the domain that we are working on? Or is it content management and web experience management under the overall umbrella of marketing technology? Correct. So when we say we want to move across domains, right, we really need to understand and narrow down on where we currently are positioned within the umbrella and where do we want to move to, right? Blanket statements might not be really working here. So how can you really move across domains, right? And from here it isn't something that I have a very firm answer to, but I can just sharing based on my experience and also experiences of my colleagues and whatever I've observed within the industry, right? Main thing would be to identify adjacencies. Identify areas where you leverage your existing capabilities and knowledge and apply them to a new domain, right? So the critical thing is to identify those adjacencies, and you have to be very thoughtful when you identify these adjacencies. Now, what do we really mean by adjacencies? Now, if I have to look at adjacencies, we said that there are a set of knowledge and capabilities, and how can you apply them to a new domain, right? So let's say you are a product manager with a knowledge and capabilities around security and identity, right? So what is the adjacency that you can probably target in order to be much more agile in terms of your, let's say your job opportunities that you can explore? It could be blockchain and Bitcoin. Same way, if you are in e-commerce marketing, the adjacency, there's a clear adjacency with e-commerce logistics, optimization, personalization, testing, right? If those are the kind of core knowledge and capabilities that you possess, can you move into crowdfunding? All the within the fintech domain, can you move into crowdfunding? Or you are a process expert in credit scoring, can you, the adjacency is clearly in terms of investments and personal finance. Same way, if you are into marketing analytics or attribution, clearly there is a adjacency around P2P lending. Now, very different domains, very different capabilities, but you will have to identify those adjacencies to arrive at that, right? So, in terms of making it real, and again, based on my pure personal experience, like, where I started and where I currently am, I would like to take this, unravel this a little bit more when we talk about adjacency and share my own personal experience. I started off after my graduation within this whole thing about supply chain. I worked on a lot of supply chain, especially in the inbound logistics part of it, like, getting material into the warehouse, understanding that, right? Understood a whole lot of that, working with different supply chain operators, with supply chain consulting firms, right? Optimizing for that, working on the exports, imports at the port level, etc. So the thing which with the domain and knowledge, as I shared in the previous slide, was around the inbound logistics. Now, as I moved across, into a new, into ERP domain, I worked, I was assigned rather, to work on the accounts payable, the accounts receivable, reconciliation, treasury, the whole finance and accounting, right? But I did a whole lot of work around accounts payable because of my, background with inbound logistics, which said that, clearly, there was a clear adjacency here, which said that, okay, inbound logistics and accounts payable. So that's where I started building up my domain, right? Whereas in the supply chain domain, I could have chosen to say that, okay, I could have worked on order management, warehousing, outbound logistics. There could be a lot of other things, but said, okay, it made me realize that, okay, inbound logistics and accounts payable have a clear thing. Now I moved toward, when I started looking at opportunities outside, let's say, outside my second company, then I looked at, identified a BPO company, moving away from a product company to a BPO company. And BPO operations were aligned along order to cash, which is O2C, record to reconcile, other. So procure to pay, yeah, it makes sense because, there is a procurement aspects, there is accounts payable. So they do, for example, this was a company, this was Genpact. Genpact did whole lot of things around procure to pay, spend analytics, spend management for a lot of companies. So there was a clear adjacency here, which said that, okay, now, you could move across a domain from pure ERP product-led company to BPO operations within the procure to pay, building products again in the procure to pay domain, right? Though now the next adjacency, if you look at the clear adjacency here, it is our record to reconcile, order to cash, others. But if you actually go down to the core of it, there was this core about BPO operations, right? So I said, okay, let me see, in terms of BPO operations, understand the BPO operations and understand the software that is there working within the BPO segment, not just the procure to pay, but for catering to these BPO operations, what are the different softwares and tools that are used? Now, again, if you look at it, it was phone systems, CRM, instant messengers, and performance tracking and measurement, right? Within, again, procure to pay, there was some more adjacency, and within BPO operations, BPO software also, there was some adjacency, right? So I moved more along these lines around performance tracking, measurement. This was the adjacency that I could identify, right? Once I identified that, performance tracking, measurement, again, when you look at, the knowledge that I could gather, the expertise that I could build was around, within the performance tracking, there were different aspects of it: workforce management, quality management, performance appraisals, or cloud analytics platforms, right? We were heavily into investing in the cloud analytics platform, and that is where, I spent a lot of time understanding and building my knowledge, expertise, and clearly it was coming up as an area where I could focus on a lot of potential, and applying that dimension to others. I saw that, okay, this could be somewhere which would help me to be much more moving across different domains. Now, the next big thing that I could identify was that, okay, once I look at cloud analytics platforms, it means that it is now I'm no longer looking at the domain of cloud analytics, but it is more about the cloud platforms. And within cloud platform, there could be infrastructure, there could be platform, there could be integration. So currently where I am, my journey is that I've arrived at the cloud data platform, right? Building on understanding of cloud platforms, building on understanding of data, and moving more along the lines of working on the cloud data platform. So if you look at it, this is again, going back to the second question of our agenda: how can we move across domains? How do we really think across domains, right? And how do we plan our journey to move across domains, right? So this is one example, my personal journey about, moving, identifying these adjacencies, and, being able to be marketable in terms of my skills, knowledge, and being comfortable, in onboarding onto different domains. So this is my personal experience. And so finally, coming to summary, what we are saying is that, we have to, as product managers, we have to stay very close to those business objectives. In order to stay very close to the business objectives, we have to be in close touch with the user needs and problems. That is the area where we bring our core skill, which is domain independent. And as you are in touch with the user needs and problem, expand your domain knowledge outward. Go back to that framework of concentric circles, expand your core domain knowledge outward. And be on the lookout for adjacencies, right? You could be, some domains are so vast. Let's say marketing technology, not necessary for you to move across domain. There are folks who have spent their lifetime in a particular domain that is vast enough. But if you want to move to a different domain, be on the lookout for adjacencies. And finally, you should follow your interests and instincts, right? So this is what I wanted to share with you all today, and I hope you found it useful. I think we are almost overshot by 6 or 7 minutes. Open to any questions that you might have. Thanks, guys.
Great, Aravind. I think that was quite insightful. So, guys, you can ask your questions. You can raise your hand. So, Aravind, I have one question here. When you're preparing for a job interview in a new domain, and typically you will have a very little time to prepare, and obviously you cannot go in depth. So what are some tips that you would suggest so that one can prepare for this upcoming job interview in a new domain fast?
I think, since we're talking about very less time, that's the constraint that you have put here. I would say, the best way to do that would be to understand the market happenings in the last 6 to 7 months, whatever has been happening, right? Understanding at least at a basic level who are the market participants, what are their market shares. Just getting to know who are the market players, etc., would be the first step. Understanding different products. Go quickly to, let's say, the way I would do it is I would go to Gartner and say, okay, for this thing, is there a magic quadrant? What are the different strengths and weaknesses of different players? Get some inputs from there, right? And gather some tips, like, Mark, what are the market landscape? How does Gartner, let's say, evaluates them? I do that a lot. How does Gartner, what are the dimensions on which Gartner evaluates the market participants? Is a good way for you to really analyze it. So these are some ways in which I use it.
Got it. So we have Bishay who wants to ask something. Bishay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Aravind. First of all, thanks for this great session. It's quite helpful. My question is, like, I am currently into a specific domain, right? So, but that domain is very niche. Means if I mention it is a contact center domain, right? But I'm definitely looking for moving into some other domains. And your agency thing, I'm sure will help me. But my question is, when we move to other domains, does the hiring companies look at us as a novice or fresher, or do they consider our past experience of the particular domain as well?
Yeah, correct. So the Bishay, to answer that question, it is depending on the demand supply situation in that particular domain. Let's say, you want to move, let's say, a fintech or a payments domain from contact center domain. Let's assume you are just taking a shot that you are into cloud telephony, right? And you are interested, and cloud telephony market is oversaturated, and you want to move to, let's say, to payments domain. Now you have to understand that within the payments domain, the demand supply situation is such that the practical reality is that there are a lot of product managers who are already there, right? Who have experience ranging from 1 year to, let's say, 10 years experience. So you coming here, you will have to bring something which none of these guys really have, right? Which could be your understanding of, let's say, some key insight on the user behavior, or something which you personally feel is very unique to you to really differentiate yourself here. Having an aspiration is one thing, but you need to demonstrate also in what way are you very differentiated with respect to these existing product managers. But let us say you are in contact center domain, but you want to move to a new domain there, where there aren't any, the demand supply situation is very different. There might be much more receptive to you, but you will have to say what are those domain independent skills where you are very strong on, right? What have you done in terms of those domain independent skills? Are you very good at product marketing? Are you good at agile methodologies, right? Which are very domain independent, right? And how do you demonstrate that? I think that will help you to move across that.
Sure, got it. Thanks.
All right, guys. So we are at the end of this session. So Aravind, thank you so much for taking time, and your thoughts and the experience were really helpful. And thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye.